This is the Doing Scary Things podcast. I'm Katie. I'm a veteran photographer, a serial entrepreneur, an aspiring author, and a relentless optimist. I'm a slow-talking, deep thinker from the Appalachian Mountains.
I'm Anna. I'm a prodigal musician, an accidental psychotherapist, and I'm living life mostly by experiment and endless curiosity. I'm a redheaded speed talker from a Midwestern farm town.
The purpose of this podcast is to talk to people who are doing some pretty scary things in their life about what it takes for them to push past fear and keep themselves going every day.
We'll also unpack the vulnerable things we're pursuing in our own lives and hopefully offer encouragement to you wherever you are on your journey.
Man, that was brilliant. Thanks for tuning in to today's podcast. Today we are interviewing my husband, Dan Snyder, from the band Paper Lights. Dan is one of the most humble people I know and would never tell you that the band was recently awarded Alternative Song and Album of the Year from the Independent Music Awards, as well as Best Pop Rock Song from Academia Awards. They've also had their music featured on CBS, MTV, and ESPN, and in commercials and placements for Coca-Cola, Land Rover, Boeing, Chick-fil-A, and Outdoor Magazine. I'm obviously super proud of him and can't wait for you all to get to know him a little bit better. Well, I'm super excited today to be here interviewing my husband, Dan Snyder, from the band Paper Lights. Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
You just asked me if I've ever been this excited to talk to you before. Maybe, but I'm excited.
I hope so.
I'm excited. I don't know.
Remember that time when we got engaged?
That was a good day. Do you want to talk about that?
Were you as excited then to talk to me, or is this more exciting?
Of course.
Okay.
I was very excited. However, I did know that day was coming.
I'm sorry.
It wasn't your fault.
I failed at the surprise.
It wasn't your fault, but we won't tell that story.
Meanwhile, this podcast was a complete surprise. And Katie had no idea.
Right. I just showed up and Anna and Dan were sitting here and they were like, please make us do an interview. So here we are. For those people listening that maybe don't know you super well, can you tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah. I was born in New Orleans, grew up in Tennessee. I like Cajun food. And I played music for 12 years now. Professionally, I guess. I have a lot of interests, but, music is still one of them. So
that's good.
We're focusing on that.
That's very fortunate.
That's good that it's still an interest after 12 years.
Yeah.
Would you call it your main jam?
Main jam. I like strawberry a lot.
Oh.
I mean, it's the thing that we've decided to pursue. I say we because she's been sucked into a lot of it by default.
So how did you get started in music?
As you know, I was driving armored cars for a living in East Tennessee, which, as it turns out, is the only occupation where criminals chase you.
Right.
And
wow,
it was dangerous and scary and weird. And it wasn't for me. I think I was just doing it because it paid $12 an hour.
Which we just realized
that we're so old that the minimum wage almost everywhere is $12 or $13 an hour.
The minimum wage in Atlanta is $13 an hour.
Wow.
When we were dating, I made $6 an hour.
Yes.
And his big job when we first got married was driving an armored car for $12 an hour. And we were set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you had, a job at, fast food place in that town, you don't give it up because there's nothing else.
There's no other jobs.
And so I thought I'd hit the jackpot with, this job. Was driving, guns and armor, and it sounded like a movie at first. And I thought that'll be fun, at least for some stories. And it turns out those stories scare me.
I bet you have better stories from touring as a musician.
Yeah.
Probably less.
We don't have to talk about
maybe less scary?
Our car business.
No, but...
But what I remember from those days, and we were working totally different shifts. I mean, that is part of our story, but you were working like overtime. So you were working 15-hour days, coming home and having breathed in the fumes of those old trucks all day. You were having serious migraines. You were vomiting. Like there were definitely consequences from that job other than
Lots of vomiting.
lots of
There was so
vomiting.
much vomiting.
We could talk about that for
That
an
is
hour.
so unfortunate.
Yeah. It's like diesel trucks from the 60s, and they just would not upgrade them or fix them. And so the fumes just came through the floorboards, and
Wow.
people got sick. But,
And by
so, yeah.
people, you mean you.
By people.
You are one of those people.
Me and the money. So yeah, when we started talking about taking a chance and doing something that we like in another city, the pros and cons list, the cons weren't very long, were they? It was just kind of
like, oh, why not?
I'm sick. I might get shot. I think I'll do music.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think even as unknown and scary as that seemed at the time, we gave ourselves a year. And I think that was kind of my saving grace, is like, let's just jump and try it. And if we hate it after a year, we can move back. We had a safety net in that regard. So
I think it's interesting, kind of the relativity of the risk, right? I think it's really cool, actually, that that's part of what gave you the freedom to try it.
You're right, Katie. I think we're going to get a nice counseling session, and I'm excited about it.
Stop with that!
I love it.
I'm sorry, I can't.
analyzed by Anna. Boom.
Analyzed.
What have been some of your biggest challenges in the last 12 years?
Well, I think it's an industry where it doesn't matter how good you are at something so much as who you know and the connections you have. And that's been really frustrating. So there's always, your own personal effort that you put into becoming good at a craft. And then I feel like with music, it's more about, everybody has made it that far. They've become the best they can. And not everybody can pass through the gatekeeper. And who is this gatekeeper and where is he? And
Exactly.
like, how do you get to know that person?
Right.
And then at that point, it feels like a lot of promotion is based on disingenuine relationships. And I have a hard time with that. And so it's this constant struggle of, I don't know if meeting the right people is even the right term, because we really haven't tried to do that much. But yeah, that's a battle. And the alternative is to stay independent in what you do, which is fine. But then the whole entirety of a workload rests on us.
Right.
And that has been probably the hardest thing. That and, the fact that being the case, if we come off the road and quit working even for a month, the cash flow stops.
Right.
Quit playing shows.
Yeah. So
Right, which you probably have to do sometimes to do things like create more of a product, right? Record more music or
Christmas.
write or have Christmas.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that you feel you have to do or that take up your time that aren't necessarily related to the music?
A lot of emails are sent, and I can't tell you how many thousands of emails are probably sent to labels or licensing agencies or promoters. With the project last year, especially trying to find some corporate sponsors for this trip around parks, and it became weeks and weeks of sending out emails and getting a response to one in like 100 of them. And there's just so much of that, and then data entry with your tracks, as you both know.
Yeah.
It just takes up so much more time than you think it will. It's like every little job seems like a 15-minute job. And then
Right.
you're like, whoa, where did 6 hours go?
Totally.
Or days
Yeah.
or weeks.
Yeah.
And I'd say design takes up a lot of my time. We've got these templates now for
You do a lot
tour
of it in-house.
posters and stuff that, save some time because it's kind of the same poster every time with, a new location. But it's still I opened one of those yesterday to do 2, and I think it still took an hour just to enter
And I
that
was
stuff.
thinking, yes, we've gotten this down. It's so fast. I mean, I know if you talk about the things that I'm sure people would never think of, it's like we basically announced a tour yesterday, and that consisted of somehow 6 hours of entering in these shows online, just because every show has a different start time. Every show has a different address. Every show has a different ticket link. Figuring all those out, then yes, you're designing a poster. Like, this stuff takes forever.
Yeah.
But if we don't do it, nobody's going to be at the shows,
It's the stuff that some artists never deal with.
I think, a lot of people have the perception of artists that, they just walk off stage into their limo or whatever. There doesn't seem to be a lot of hard work involved or something.
Or that they're just not trying.
Right.
That
they're
they
not
just
trying.
show up and play and that's it.
Right. And I think that goes to what you've mentioned. Oh, they're just like oozing with raw talent and they don't have to work hard at anything.
Yeah.
Has any of your past 12 years been effortless?
No.
Oh, interesting.
Well, and I'll say this. So I started just playing keyboards and pianos for other artists and did that for, 8 years of it straight before even trying to do our own music. And now I do both things. So, it's this probably an even split between our own band and other people's bands.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a different dynamic too when you're just in a supporting role of another artist, because you don't have all that responsibility. You're just kind of a contract worker.
Right. Hired gun.
Yeah. And so it's been pretty eye-opening for us the last several years of taking that kind of responsibility on, because it's so much more than people really think it is.
Has it been helpful for you to maintain kind of a part of your workload that is being a hired gun that doesn't have that pressure? Or if you had an ideal dream situation, would you want to be full-time running your own thing all the time and not even diverting your energy to something else?
Yeah, I think, it's really fun to just support someone else. And in some ways, in a lot of ways, it's just easier. And then if you're running your own artist thing, it's kind of like a small company, and the responsibilities that come with it are enormous, but there's also a bigger payoff at the end of that, and it's more rewarding, I think.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I'd like to do more of our own thing, but
yes, and maybe farm out some of those million tasks to other people who are
definitely need more
supporting
help.
you.
If anyone's listening and this sounds like your dream
Send
job,
your application.
please email us. Okay, so you mentioned really briefly about the Parks project, and some people may not know what that was. Do you want to explain that really quickly?
Yeah, we took a little over, how long did we go? 2.5 months of last year. We bought a huge Sprinter van and a team of 4 people at a time. We all went out to 13 different national parks and recorded samples from nature to incorporate into music and make a record. And so it was a bigger undertaking than we thought it would be, and it's just ended up being this big project, but it was a lot of fun, and we got done somehow.
You're finished. You're really good at deadlines. I'll give you that.
Have to set deadlines.
Completion is important. That's all I'm saying.
To any project, you're right.
It is.
So the album is called Everything is Sound, and that released earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. So one of my favorite songs on the album is called Release the Bear. And I wanted to know if you would tell us a little bit about that song and what it's about.
Yeah. I wrote Release the Bear as kind of a metaphor for the struggle of being an artist. And in my experience, that's very like manic, back and forth between hopeful and exciting experience and just bouts of really depressive experiences. And so, like, even in the first verse, I wrote, I fight my fear, I fight my doubt, I form a plan till courage runs out. And then you notice in the second verse, Shane's guitars just go huge into this like nasty metal riff, and then it just falls out into like a really hopeful sounding verse again. And that's kind of how I feel about the whole thing. It's just constant ups and downs.
Yeah.
And there's never any feeling of stability, or at least there hasn't been for me yet. And so, yeah, that's what the song's about. I feel like, well, I was told by several people that it was the hardest song they've ever had to mix. So.
Right. I was in the room when Jeremy sent the first mix, and for some reason no one had warned him or like explained to him what you were going for. So he had made it sort of sound, normal. Like it made... Sorry, we'll scratch all that.
No, it's great.
But, he had mixed it the way you normally would without knowing that you wanted those highs
extremes.
and lows in there. Yeah, the extremes.
Yeah, I'm sure
And
the poor guy got the stems and was like, why is there this crazy 80s guitar riff in the middle of nowhere and just back into this really dainty part of the song?
When I first had that moment of realizing that sound was just kind of the feeling of when you're releasing a project into the world and not knowing how people might react, that's at least how I interpreted it. And I was like, okay, this is amazing. Like, I just loved it because it's such a cool representation of that, I feel like.
Thanks, hon.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking me to sing on it.
And Katie sang on it.
And calling me dainty.
Dainty.
You're so dainty. Is it okay with you if we play that song?
Yep.
Okay, we're going to play it for you now.
I fight my fear, I fight my doubt. I form a plan till courage runs out. Excite the fire, stoke the flame. Ride the momentum, don't ever let yourself feel the pain. Just stay asleep, all is fine. Cast your chips in one last time. The game is cruel, but the life is fair. Just stand in line, pick the lock, swing the gate, release the girl. A fresher start is hard to fight. I've paid these dues, I've made my mind. I passed your house late in the night. There's beauty in every town, but nowhere seems to feel
So the picture that you've painted that this song kind of represents of the lifestyle of an artist, right? It's like a lot of extremes. And it kind of struck me that doing that or pursuing that as your lifestyle really is a double-edged sword. Like on one side, you have a lot of freedom and it's very constructivist, right? Like you're building your own life and your own schedule. And then on the other side, like you said, it's a lot of work and a lot of little tasks, but a lot of unknowns and chaos. And like Katie was saying, you don't know how people are going to receive it. There's not a given structure for really anything. And so that makes me wonder how it is to try to set goals for yourself.
I find it really difficult to set goals in music. Is that what you're asking?
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, again, back to the gatekeeper thing, like, I can set a goal like we're going to go to 13 parks and that's going to be a really cool experience and we're going to come out of it with a record. I can't say we're going to tour with you too at least 10 days of the year and that's my goal. Like
Right.
I mean, there's certain limits to the goals that you can set in the industry and it's always like a humbling come back down to earth kind of realization when we have to sit around and set these goals because, you know, without the right people believing in what you do, it doesn't matter how good you are or how, sometimes even how connected you are, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and it seems like even the goals that you're saying, like, are settable, like we're going to play in 13 parks, for example, that's a measurable thing, but that's a goal of, like, your activity, not of the outcome of that activity necessarily, right?
Yeah,
it's
that's
like,
fair.
We can, like, make a plan and follow it, but we can still only be just so certain of how that's going to turn out or what it's going to return to us, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, I used to try to set goals for like how many licensing deals we would get in a year and things like that. And it's just so frustrating because just so many factors are out of your control. Mm-hmm. And so I found myself just setting a lot of goals like you're talking about in their stead because it's so impossible sometimes.
Is that something you're sort of constantly readjusting and reassessing for yourself because there's so much that's out of your control?
I think one thing that I've tried to do as a bystander to this is when good things happen, I will bring them to you and I'll be like, look at this. This is exciting, you know, because, and you've explained this to me that, you know, you can't really do this based on people's reactions. And I think that's really smart. And I feel like you've protected yourself in that you make the art that you want to make and you put it out there. And I think that's really admirable. But because of that, I've sort of noticed that it's like good or bad. Like if people love it, you don't necessarily always feel that. That's at least what it seems like to me. So, you know, to go back to the original point, I try to bring up like, okay, these are measurable things. Like these are little things maybe along the way, but it's showing that we're progressing. And I feel like, you know, trying to focus in on those, like, look how far we've come. Like, look at what is happening instead of just maybe what can feel negative or depressing sometimes.
What do those translate to directly for you? What's been the most rewarding experiences so far?
I don't know because, I mean, to what you're saying, Katie, I never wrote these songs for those people anyway, for anyone else. Like it was kind of just, I had a love for it and it was something that I wanted to do. A finished product was the payoff. So like if people like or hate it, it's kind of inconsequential to begin with. So yeah, I do have a hard time like leaning into, you know, excitement about that or even, you know, somebody's critique of it.
We did talk about that in an earlier episode about how almost necessary that can be when you're doing something that is scary or vulnerable.
Like that basically it's best to approach it that way rather than being like, I'm going to make something that I want other people to like and that's what's going to validate it and what's going to make it
right
matter, you know?
Because if you don't then get that from the world, that's completely crushing.
Right.
You know, on the
Right.
flip side, if you're doing it for yourself, you know, it's almost like you have what you need. You have the tools you need.
Intrinsic value.
Yeah, so I think the bigger payoff for me has always just been like, I finished this and it feels really great, or even the deadlines thing, like if that's a goal that I can set and keep, it feels like a huge sense of accomplishment, more so than, you know, somebody, you know, saying I love this, which, you know, is great. I'm not saying is a negative thing at all. Like I'm really grateful when people can connect to it, but it's just not necessary for the process, I guess.
Is part of the intrinsic reward for you, though, not just, you know, recording a whole album and then keeping it to yourself? Like, part of it is releasing it into the world.
Yeah, I think releasing it is a really important step, but not necessarily for the sake of the world. Like,
Right. But for your sake, to feel like it's fully completed, that's part of it.
Yeah, because that's the step of vulnerability. It's like, these are my thoughts. This is something that I created.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Right.
And yeah, it's out there and you can't take it back.
Yeah.
Ever.
Which is kind of exciting.
Until you delete it off the internet.
Ain't no such thing.
Forever.
Oh my gosh.
Would you say you're pursuing something in your life right now that's really scary?
Yeah. Music.
Awesome.
Yeah. I started singing in front of people because it was the scariest thing I could imagine doing. And most of the fear surrounding that is gone, which, thank goodness. That one was hard. A lot of people, I mean, you might not feel this way, Anna. I don't know either of you, actually, if you can relate to this, but it just seemed like the most vulnerable thing that could be done ever to me. It was such a mountain, and there were stages of it which I wasn't prepared for, like the stage where your voice just kind of shakes uncontrollably because you're singing in front of people and you just don't know how to even attempt to straighten it out, so you just go with it. And then there's a stage beyond that you're just like miserable for hours ahead of it and like
dreading it.
Yeah. I don't know if it's the same for a lot of people. It seems like some people are born for show business and they just
Thanks for looking me in the eyes when you said that.
Born for the stage, we are.
That was not me.
But I have to say, though, I really do relate to that, and this is actually perfect for the Danecdote I wanted to tell. Because, thank you for the groan, because there was actually a time, I don't even know if you remember this, but we played in a country band together for a while, Dan and I. And I was that kind of like gut-wrenchingly mortified about doing sound checks. I hated sound checks.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
No.
Well, I told you about it, about how I basically just wanted to like puke in my shoes every time I had to sound check. Because for me, like singing with the band, like in the context, it's not really that scary. It's more exhilarating than scary, so I can deal with it, right? Sound check is so awful to me.
So low. No instrumentation.
So terrible. Yes, and I was so anxious about it all the time, and I told you about it, and then I remember at one certain rehearsal, it was like almost my time to sound check, but you were on keys, and you started playing Love Song by Sarah Bareilles to let me sound check to something that I like knew.
I don't remember that.
I was so grateful. It felt like you like saved my life, like I was falling out of an airplane and my parachute didn't work, and you like zoomed in and like grabbed me and let your parachute rip. Like,
wow.
It meant so much to me. I definitely relate to that feeling.
Well, and I think a lot of people maybe might find that interesting that that's something you still deal with 12 years in.
Yeah.
Or that you had it to begin with. Because I think there is this preconception that, you know, if you are fronting a band, you probably like attention, right? And that hasn't been the case for you.
No. No, I hate attention. But I will say I love live experiences, especially smaller, intimate ones, which is something that I've heard a lot of bigger artists say that they're still scared of, because there's a huge difference in an arena where you're playing to thousands of people and lights are in your face and you can't see any of them.
The faceless masses.
Yeah, and then you just go backstage and never talk to anybody. And there's a difference in that and playing in a room to 20 people who are staring at you and you feel it.
The lights are on.
Oh, no.
Fluorescent lighting.
We're all looking at each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a huge difference in that. And I've learned to really appreciate those environments for some reason. And I think for whatever I lack in caring about what people think about the music personally is made up for in environments like that when you connect with people regardless of what the music is, and you can have an experience together, and then afterwards you can talk to those people and kind of build somewhat of a relationship.
Yeah.
Like that's really rewarding.
It's sort of been your instrument to, you could say, to getting
if you will.
to getting to know those people and connect with them, right?
Yeah, it's been really cool. And that's not to say that I care any less about the music, because I really do. But yeah, it's been a really cool experience, especially with the resurgence of the house concert.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like that's just an inspiring atmosphere. As songwriters, I think that probably makes sense to all of us, because what inspires us in general, like it's relationships and emotions and intimacy, and you get an infusion of that at a house show that you really don't get in an arena. An arena has its own magic, but it's not that magic.
No, it's different, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about some scared people, like the whole dynamic of like strangers walking into a house and they don't know what they're in for.
Yeah.
It's pretty great.
Yeah,
sometimes.
they're often more nervous about the awkwardness of that situation than the artist is. So it's a really fun place to watch everybody just get a sudden sense of relief when you know that they feel like comfortable and this isn't going to be awkward. And I'm really glad I came to this thing.
Yeah, it really is the best. Once everybody has relaxed and it's like, okay, nobody's like gonna hurt anybody. Like, this is normal. And, you know.
It's really like, it strikes me as very paradoxical that there is such a resurgence of that type of show in this day and age, when also social anxiety is like through the roof because of our like sensitization to social situations. Like that's just asking for it.
I think that's why it's weird to people.
Yeah.
It's like, because, you know, these aren't necessarily people that know the host.
Right.
You know, so they're walking into a stranger's house.
Like, maybe I won't get murdered.
And, you know, I mean, I would imagine they probably have their friend that's going to, like, call them in 5 minutes and give them an excuse to leave if they need it, you know? So there's always, like, everyone's kind of tiptoeing in.
Yeah.
And then it's like everybody relaxes. And you really do. You just connect on such a deeper level once that fear is gone.
Totally.
Yeah, they come in, and I sense that a lot of people feel like this is going to be some guy awkwardly sitting in the corner with a guitar and singing songs that are bad. And I'm going to have to golf clap and pretend that I like it. I'm going to have to smile at people that I don't know and pretend that we're having a good time. And I feel like we've intentionally brought a different style and setup and, you know, full band to a living room. And kind of tried to blow those expectations out so that people are comfortable. But it seems like the result of that experience is consistently like, wow, I didn't want to come tonight, but I'm so glad I did. And this is such a unique and amazing experience. And everybody always has a good time.
Yeah, it's like a pleasant surprise every time.
Every time. I'm like, who are these people that have forced you here? Like, but I'm glad that they did.
That's how I feel
great.
anytime I actually make it to the gym. I'm like, God, I didn't want to come, but I'm so glad I did.
That's so good.
Another song from Everything Is Sound that I love so much is Simple. And I'm really curious about where that song came from. Can you tell us about that song?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I guess it's been about 7-ish years ago. Both of my grandfathers died within kind of a short time period. And they were both, you know, war vets and they both had their quirks, and they're really great men in different ways. And I remember thinking about the two different experiences and watching them in the hospital, and they taught me a lot about death in one way and like the process of it, because really I had no clue outside of just like terrible accidents where we lost a friend or something, and so I'd never like seen the natural progression of that. And I was just thinking about each of their attitudes and how they reacted differently to it, and both in really kind of beautiful ways. And, one of them was kind of funny about it even. And so I wrote that song kind of about those combined experiences and just how much each of them being such manly men just kind of acted like, I would rather you not suffer and watch this, just kind of like leave and do your own thing kind of attitude.
Yeah.
And, one of them told me on the phone, like, this is the last time I'll talk to you. Like, don't worry about it. I love you. Like, it's a really cool conversation to get to have. I just remember thinking, wow, like the way that these guys are reacting right now is not what I expected.
Yeah.
And I just wrote a song about it, and that simple was it.
That's super cool. We're going to play that one too, if it's okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
This isn't what I wanted you to see, but pull another layer back. Is it what you thought that I would be? This isn't how I wanted it to show. Forget the courage that I lack. Pull the curtain, turn your back. 'Cause lies fall away before the dawn, and love finds a way before it's gone. Live the life I fought for you and won, and live it simple. This isn't what I wanted you to see. With all the mistakes that I've made and all the habits I can shake, this isn't how I wanted it to show. With all the ways that I have left, feels so hard just letting go. Because breath pulls away before you're done, and life soars too high and then it's gone. Live the life I fought for you and won, and live it simple.
It's a really special song.
And Katie sang on it.
I did sing on it.
And this is what Josh said about it in production, is Katie's voice brought a lot of joy to kind of a really dark subject matter. And it is. It's a little bit of a happy sounding song now because of your singing on it.
Oh, well, thank you. I like that. I mean, it was definitely really special to be a part of that. You know, I knew both of your grandpas, and so yeah, that it feels really special to have that immortalized in a way.
That's interesting that Josh said that, because you sing on our song Deathbed, which could be like the most dark, depressing song in the whole world ever, but it really doesn't sound like that.
It's a gift. What can I say? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's meant to be dark. You know, death is such an unknown, but and there's so many questions, but it doesn't have to be.
It's such a human experience too, you know?
Well, your voice makes songs about death seem like really happy, so congratulations.
I'm a trickster.
You are. I have a follow-up question for you, Dan.
Yes.
I think you very poignantly and succinctly said earlier that something that still scares you in your life is doing music. So I'm wondering, like, what about it is scary to you now? Are there different things that are scary to you about doing it now?
Do you know the answer to this?
I don't.
You're acting like you do.
No, I think that's a great question. Like, are there things that scare you now that didn't when you first began? Like, how has the journey changed?
I think going back to like personal goals and stuff, it's really hard to think that I could be in my 40s and doing the same things. And there's as wrong as it may be, there's a feeling of like, if this doesn't progress, like, do I need to get out of it? Do I need to do something else?
Yeah. So you wrestle with that sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. And not even in a sense that like the industry has dictated that if you haven't quote unquote made it by 23, get out of here because you don't stand a chance. It's not like necessarily just an age thing. It's like, I've been doing this for so long.
Right.
If we don't have, especially like when it comes to things like financial stability or like, I haven't had health insurance and I don't know how long.
Right.
Like, I can't remember. Just things like that start to wear on you after a long time. And like, I wonder a lot if, you know, I have the patience for it.
Yeah. Well, and so far it seems like every time you've wrestled with that, to keep going is what's won, right? So what makes it worthwhile to keep doing?
Katie convinces me to.
We talked about that previously, right? I force him. I make him do it.
Every time I try to quit and go like work at Starbucks, she's like, no, you need, like, things are progressing. Here are all the things that are going on that are really like, good.
You're terrible at making coffee. You better not.
Yeah.
Well, it's that really weird thing that it's when you're so close to it, it's hard to see the good things sometimes. Not that Dan is always in this like cloud of sadness all the time. Like, I think of the two of us, he's much more realistic about things. It's hard to see the letters of encouragement coming in and saying, this meant a lot to me. And, you know, and then to still think of it in the terms he's talking about, like, well, that didn't necessarily pay my bills, you know, like, yeah, okay, I got some awards, but this isn't, you know, helping in this practical way.
Totally.
You know, so I think just the longevity of it gets trying.
One of the things that's kind of helped a little bit, I had this friend that was managing a band for a long time, and they were progressing and we watched it. And the week that they were playing their first show in Madison Square Garden, like sold out show. Wow. I was asking him some questions about it and the experience, and he was kind of like, well, they're going to quit soon. And I was like, why? And he went on to explain, you know, basically they don't see the progress. And like,
you're like, what?
Yeah. And you know, by comparison, like I'm far shot from where they were in that experience, but it seems like it's the case that no matter where you are on a scale or spectrum of, you know, what people will gauge as success. Yeah. It's really difficult when you're in it to see progress. Yeah. And I had to remind myself of that because I definitely can't see the progress sometimes. Like, it definitely doesn't show up, especially when you're talking about like years of your life spent on one thing. And she's good at reminding me of that.
In the sort of phase of creation of art, the intrinsic reward really is very rewarding to you, but it's kind of a different set of considerations when you're wrestling with that. Like, do I keep going? You know, like, I'm sure that intrinsic reward of putting that art out there that you've created is like that's on the pros list, right? Like that's a reason to keep going, but there's a lot of other reasons you have to consider too.
Yeah.
And I think it probably all goes back to not knowing the end result, right? Mm-hmm. It might stop progressing at some point. And then, say you're 20 years in and it stops. Like, would that have been worth it? There's just so many what ifs.
Right.
So it's hard to go down that path when you're in the middle of it, I think, and probably not healthy. Like, it's probably best to just kind of keep your eyes on the prize and just keep going for it, I think.
It gets existential really fast. I mean, even for us, and we're not 12 years into such an endeavor, so.
Yeah.
It will be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had a lot of years. Should we just cancel this whole thing and never start? Will that save a lot of a lot of embarrassment, a lot of whatever?
Probably. But
please allow me to be your Katie and push you in ways you don't want to be pushed.
Okay. Accepted. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time. And, obviously we have these conversations a lot, but I was really excited to be able to kind of share this with the listeners of the podcast. Just in closing, is there any advice that you would give those listening who might be scared to take the first or next step in pursuing something they're passionate about?
Yeah, I think the only thing I can say to that is your 9 to 5 with the insurance job is no safer than what we do. And it's all risky. So the bigger risk is just not taking a chance on something that you're passionate about.
Love it.
I love it too. But I'm going to edit that out and put in the part where you said, run.
Fair enough.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Be sure to follow our band Jasper and Jade online. All of those links can be found in our show notes. On the show today, Dan mentioned Shane, Josh, and Jeremy. He was, of course, referring to 3 crucial parts of his music-making team: Shane Cole, Josh Stewart, and Jeremy Griffith. Shane played those killer guitars you hear throughout the Everything Is Sound album. Josh co-produced the album and tours with Paper Lights. And Jeremy has worked with everyone from Norma Jean and Under Oath to Johnny Swim. I'll put all of their info in the show notes, as well as more links to where you can like and follow Paper Lights. Please take a second to leave us a review on iTunes, and remember to tune in next week. My palms are sweating.
Edit out the part where she calls me a bunny.
But we won't really.
Durka, durka.